Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, and with me is Nishit Kumar, bringing glimpses of major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. As the world fights the COVID-19 pandemic, we begin with a message of caution to stay safe and protected by following these three simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. The headlines. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar reaches Port Louis, hands over 1 lakh additional doses of Made in India COVID-19 vaccines to Mauritius. India signs $50 million line of credit agreement in defense sector with Maldives. Strike call by protesters paralyzes business in several cities of Myanmar. Global Terror Financing Watchdog FATF plenary meeting to take a call on grey list status of Pakistan. Australia says there will be no change in the media law related to the tech giants. And in boxing, India's Arundhati Chaudhary and Narem Baby Rojisana Chanu win gold in 30th Adriatic Pearl Tournament in Montenegro. India's Vaccine Maitri initiative is going places. More than 24 countries have already been supplied Made in India COVID-19 vaccines. The External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, on Monday handed over 1 lakh additional doses of commercially procured Made in India COVID-19 vaccines to Mauritius. India had earlier sent 1 lakh doses of Made in India COVID-19 vaccines to the island nation. Dr. Jaishankar began his Mauritius visit with a meeting with his counterpart, Alan Ganu, on Monday. Prime Minister of Mauritius, Mr. Praveen Jugnauth, conveyed his appreciation for India's support to Mauritius in dealing with the oil spill last year.
We have the opportunity to again acknowledge this morning with gratitude the emergency assistance provided by India for the relief salvage operations following the oil spill which occurred when the bulk carrier MV Wakashu ran aground on the coral reef in July last year.
On 17th February, India's Union Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, approved the signing of the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation and Partnership Agreement CECPA between India and Mauritius. Dr. Jaishankar expressed pleasure at the development which makes Mauritius the first African country with which India has such an agreement.
India is privileged to have entered into a comprehensive economic cooperation and partnership agreement (CEPA) with Mauritius. This agreement is India's first such agreement with an African country, as noted by the Prime Minister. It will provide a timely boost for the revival of our post-COVID economies and also enable Indian investors to use Mauritius as a launchpad for business expansion into continental Africa, helping the prospect of Mauritius emerging as a hub of Africa.
In a series of tweets, Dr. S. Jaishankar said they reviewed the bilateral relations and the successful developmental partnership between the two countries. He reiterated that India will be a ready partner in the economic recovery and revival efforts of Mauritius. The minister also met Prime Minister of Mauritius, Praveen Jugnauth, and conveyed the greetings from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Dr. S. Jaishankar and Mr. Jugnauth held comprehensive discussions on the status of implementation of various infrastructure projects. India signed a $50 million line of credit agreement in defense sector with the Maldives, reaffirming its commitment for overall development and security of its maritime neighbor. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, who was in the Maldives on Sunday, said that the agreement will facilitate capability building in the maritime domain. The credit line agreement for defense projects was signed between the Finance Ministry of Maldives and the Export-Import Bank of India to boost the maritime capabilities of the strategically vital Indian Ocean island nation. Dr. S. Jaishankar also co-signed the UTF Harbour project agreement with Maldives Defence Minister Maria Didi. He He said that the project agreement will strengthen Maldivian Coast Guard capability and facilitate regional humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts. The minister said that India and Maldives are partners in development as well as partners in security. The Maldives National Defence Force Coast Guard harbour will come up at Sefavaru. Ms. Maria Didi said that defence cooperation between India and the Maldives has been a key element of the sisterly relationship between the two countries from time immemorial. She said that the Coast Guard harbour and dockyard at Sefavaru will mark another significant milestone in this journey.
Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, has stressed that the private sector can play an instrumental role in research, innovation, design, manufacturing and indigenous defence products to make countries self-reliant in the defence sector. Speaking at the webinar for effective implementation of Union Budget 2021 provisions in the defence sector, he appealed to private sector to work with the government in a coordinated manner to prepare the roadmaps and action plans to create defence technology as per the need of the 21st century.
प्राइवेट सेक्टर को आगे लाने के लिए, उनके लिए काम करना और आसान बनाने के लिए सरकार उनके ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस पर बल दे रही है। मैं डिफेंस सेक्टर में आ रहे प्राइवेट सेक्टर की एक चिंता भी समझता हूं। अर्थव्यवस्था के अन्य सेक्टर्स के मुकाबले डिफेंस सेक्टर में सरकार का दखल कई गुना ज्यादा है, क्योंकि यह सेक्टर नेशनल सिक्योरिटी से जुड़ा हुआ है, लेकिन साथ ही प्राइवेट सेक्टर की साझेदारी के बिना 21वीं सदी का डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इकोसिस्टम खड़ा नहीं हो सकता, यह भी मैं तो भली भांति समझता हूं।
Amid continuing protests against the military government, a strike called on Monday paralyzed Myanmar business as large crowds gathered in several cities including Yangon, Karen State, Metkena in Kachin State and others in the country. Despite warnings from the military government that confrontations could turn deadly, protesters gathered at Yangon's Leidan Junction to participate in the nationwide general strike. However, the military government on Monday said that the authorities have exercised restraint despite incitements of unrest and violence. It said they have used minimum force against this disturbance to maintain public safety and the rule of law, calling statements of some embassies in Yangon as interference in the internal affairs of Myanmar and violation of the Vienna Convention of the Diplomatic Relations of 1961. It asked the foreign missions to strictly adhere to the Vienna Convention and the UN Charter. Meanwhile, Facebook said that it has removed the pages of the military mouthpiece TV channel MRTV and the main page of the Myanmar military Tatmadaw for violations of its standards.
The Financial Action Task Force FATF commences its three-day plenary meeting on Monday. Pakistan is hanging in the grey list of the global anti-terror watchdog. Pakistan has been trying to garner support from the member nations to escape the list. We have a report.
According to various reports, some European countries have taken a stand against Pakistan, saying that Islamabad has not fully implemented all the points of a plan of action set by it to come out of the grey list. Therefore, Pakistan may find it difficult to get out of the grey list before June this year. In its last plenary held in October last year, the FATF had kept Pakistan on the grey list, citing its failure to fulfill 6 out of 27 obligations of the global money laundering and terror financing watchdog. The obligations include failure to take action against two of India's most wanted terrorists, Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Maulana Masood Azhar and Jamaat-ud-Dawa head Hafiz Saeed. According to the reports, Pakistan had compiled its response to these 6 recommendations and has submitted a report to the FATF Secretariat. The members would now evaluate Pakistan's responses during its plenary meeting. Earlier this month, the Armenian National Committee of America, ANCA, had urged the money laundering watchdog to add Islamabad to its blacklist for terror financing that includes the funding of jihadist mercenaries to fight for Azerbaijan against RSEC. The Paris-based watchdog had placed Pakistan on the grey list in June 2018. It had asked Islamabad to implement a plan of action to curb money laundering and terror financing by the end of 2019, but the deadline was extended later on due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Staying in the FATF grey list has made it difficult for Pakistan to secure financial aid from the International Monetary Fund IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank ADB and the European Union. Swati Rakheja, World News.
In India, a total of 1 crore 11 lakh people have been administered the COVID-19 vaccines in the country so far. Union Health Ministry said 31,681 people have been inoculated with COVID-19 vaccine doses in the last 24 hours. Now, let's take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world.
The British government has declared that every adult in the country would get a first coronavirus vaccine shot by the 31st of July. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has indicated that the country is prepared to set out a cautious plan to ease the UK's lockdown. South Korea will begin administering Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines to medical staff on the 27th of February. Prime Minister Chung Sai-Kwin made the announcement on Monday. The country will begin the COVID-19 inoculation program with AstraZeneca's vaccines on Friday, with first jabs to be administered to staff members and patients under the age of 65 at nursing hospitals and facilities. India has sent 13 boxes of COVID-19 vaccine to Mongolia. The vaccine was sent from the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport, Mumbai, to Mongolia on Sunday. External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has announced that 25 nations across the world have already received made-in-India vaccines, and 49 more countries will be supplied in the coming days, ranging from Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean to Africa, Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Turkey today reported 6,546 new COVID-19 cases, including 601 symptomatic patients, taking the total number of positive cases in the country to over 2.6 million. Turkey started mass COVID-19 vaccination on January 14th after the authorities approved the emergency use of the Chinese corona vaccine. More than 5.5 million people have been vaccinated so far. Anuja Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
The International Solar Alliance was launched at the 21st session of the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, or COP21, held in Paris. The organization, which started out on the 30th of November 2015 as a partnership between Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, and the President of France, Mr. François Hollande, has now grown into an alliance of 121 solar resource-rich countries lying fully or partially between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. In today's Hotspot segment, we are in conversation with the new Director General of the International Solar Alliance, Dr. Ajay Mathur. Formerly with the Energy and Resource Institute TERI, Dr. Mathur was elected to the post in the first Special Assembly of the ISA members on the 15th of February. In an exclusive interview with All India Radio, Dr. Mathur shares his vision for the organization, his views on the global solar energy scenario, India's leadership role in the global climate action and more. Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Dr. Ajay Mathur, for speaking to All India Radio. At the outset, we'd like to extend our warmest congratulations on your election as the Director General of the International Solar Alliance.
Pawan, first of all, thank you very much. I warmly thank you for your comments and look forward to taking ISA to new heights.
My first question to you, sir, in your inaugural address after being elected as the Director General of the ISA on the 15th of February, you spoke on the vision that you have for the organization that you are now helming. For the benefit of our listeners, could you please talk about the ISA and your vision for the first 100 days as the head of the organization?
I take over the ISA from the 15th of March after the completion of the term of the current Director General, and my goals are largely 3. The first is we engage in much greater depth with our member countries to understand where is it that solarization makes sense to them. In other words, mainstream it into their energy development strategies. Some may find that what is needed is how do I add solar to the grid. Others may find, how do I manage the system? Others still may find that what is important is to have useful applications of solar energy, whether it is solar pumps or dentist chairs with solar or whatever. Find those, make those projects, and get funding for them. That, I think, is the important part. The second thing that I will focus on is that we need to be always state of the art, and therefore bringing in partners from across the world to develop state of the art reports every year on technology, on investments, on markets. And the third thing that I want to focus on is to see that we are able to provide the kind of coordination and facilitation globally, not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries, so that we can use global expertise, no matter where it comes from, to wherever it is needed.
India has long been on a path to green growth, and solar energy has been a critical aspect of this endeavor. Could you talk about India's achievements in developing its solar energy capabilities and how these learnings can be shared with the world through ISA?
The biggest thing that India has shown is that we control the technology now and we control the market. And as a result, over the past 6 years or so, we have seen the prices of solar electricity drop from about 18 rupees a kilowatt hour to about 1.99, less than 2 rupees a kilowatt hour. Solar electricity is today the cheapest electricity in India when the sun is shining. This by itself is a huge learning, something that can be shared, because if we are able to carry out the kinds of procurements on the same pattern again and again and again, we see a reduction in costs and an increase in volume. The second thing that we are learning is how is it that we have to create the capacities that are needed, human capacities. How do I get people who are trained, people who are available everywhere? How do I get people who can design these projects? How do I get people who can finance these projects, creating this ecosystem? And again, this is a kind of learning that applies across the world, and therefore having these kinds of skills development programs is also one of the learnings that we have had.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Climate Ambition Summit held last December said that India is not only on track to achieve its Paris climate targets, but it is looking at exceeding them. He also set ambitious targets for India's solar energy capacity enhancement at the summit. How do you, sir, see India achieving these targets?
In our NDC, the nationally determined contributions that we put as part of the Paris Agreement, we had said that at least 40% of the installed capacity in the country would come from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. We already are at something like 36%. So our own estimate is that by next year, 2022, we would have crossed the target that we have set for ourselves for 2030. And at that time, it had seemed a very ambitious target in 2015. Now, at the Climate Ambition Summit in September 2018, the Prime Minister said we will move to 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. This is a formidable target. The only way this can happen is that solar becomes the technology of choice. And how does it become the technology of choice? By being the cheapest electricity any time of the day. I'd mentioned earlier the solar already is the cheapest form of electricity at the time when the sun is shining. But when it is not shining, coal is the cheapest. But tomorrow, if we are able to bring in the kind of storage technologies so that solar electricity at any time of the day is the cheapest electricity, then we can certainly we can exceed the 450 gigawatts target as well. So for us, the greatest challenge is we need to ensure that round the clock, renewable electricity becomes cost competitive with electricity from fossil fuels, and does that very soon.
So, speaking from an agenda which called for common but differentiated responsibilities, the Global South is now taking the lead in climate action with organizations like the International Solar Alliance. How do you view this development?
The Climate Convention uses the word common but differentiated responsibilities. So it is common responsibilities. It also has a word after this, common and differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. As far as India is concerned, we still believe that the vast heavy lifting to correct for the emissions that are already out there has to be done by those who emit it. They have greater responsibilities. But as far as India is concerned, we also have responsibilities. We will ensure that more and more of the energy that is produced and is used in the future is low and ultimately zero carbon. We will also ensure that this is provided, that these learnings are provided across the board to countries in the south so that they can also gain from our experience on how to grow your energy system, but grow it in a manner that is not heavy on carbon emissions. I think what has happened is that we have learned, we have brought prices of solar down and are now in a process where our responsibility is to ensure that these learnings which we have made are made available to the rest of the developing world as well.
Could you share for our listeners some of the fundamental challenges towards solarizing India?
As we have discussed, the fundamental challenge is to ensure that solar electricity becomes available round the clock at prices that are competitive with electricity from fossil fuels. We are already at a point where if you're only looking at electricity from solar, during the time when the sun is shining, it is the cheapest. Now, the next step is to bring in storage, whether it is pumped hydro, whether it is batteries, so that we can store the electricity when it is generated and use it at the time when the demand for it is there. And the demand these days, the peak demand occurs between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. when the sun is not shining. This ability to have cost-effective storage is our current greatest challenge.
Sir, you mentioned about the drop in cost per kilowatt hour of solar power, which is great for the consumers. However, there is a growing concern from some countries, such as in Africa, about the profitability of solar power projects for the private sector. How do you think a balance between profitability and consumer affordability can be achieved in this light?
The way we have done it in India is through a regulated electricity system in which, number one, the tariffs for consumers are fixed by the regulator. And the tariffs in turn decide what is the price that distribution companies would pay when they buy the electricity. So what this does is it enables the guys who are generating electricity to get a decent return on their investment. Currently in India it's 14%. We'll probably reduce it further. And at the same time, the benefits are passed on to the consumers. In other words, the only way to ensure profitability for the generator and lower prices to the consumer is to ensure that you have fully functioning and transparent regulatory systems.
So, Dr. Mathur, India and France together embarked on this journey to solarize the world. How critical is this partnership for the International Solar Alliance's future?
So, India and France is where it started. Today, there are 86 countries which have signed the ISA treaty, and of these 86, 73 have ratified the treaty as well. In other words, the number of countries in the ISA is increasing. Nevertheless, for any partnership to flourish, particularly during its early years, you need champions. And in this case, the championship is provided by India and France. I think we are still at the early years where we need to convince countries that it is in their interest to move towards solar earlier than they would otherwise, else we will have stranded assets left, we'll have too much urban air pollution and so on. Now, the benefit of working with France is that it has both on the one side technology prowess, but on the other side it has relationships with many countries, particularly the French-speaking countries of Africa, with whom we have a good access but a lower degree of relationship. On the other hand, we have a good degree of relationship with many other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia and in East Africa, which is where we have a comparative advantage. So together, we cover the vast amount of the developing world. This is important because as the ISA develops, we will need to make sure that no country is left behind.
Thank you, Dr. Ajay Mathur, for speaking to All India Radio. So listeners, that was Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, speaking exclusively to All India Radio on the organization's future.
Australia has announced on Monday that there will be no change to the proposed laws that would make companies like Google and Facebook pay news outlets for content. Australia's Minister for Finance, Mr. Simon Birmingham, according to reports, has said that the bill as it stands meets the right balance. A report.
The leadership in Australia is locked in a tussle with tech giants such as Facebook over the new media bargaining code. Facebook last Thursday blocked Australian users from sharing or viewing news content on the platform, causing alarm over public access to key information. The move prompted Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison to call on Facebook to lift its news blockade in the country and negotiate deals with media outlets. Mr. Morrison on Friday said the government remained committed to implementing the proposed law, forcing Facebook to pay news outlets for content, despite the social media giant's decision to black out all news media in the country. Speaking to All India Radio earlier, in an exclusive interview, Australia's High Commissioner to India, Mr. Barry Robert O'Farrell, spoke about the rationale of the new media code.
What's important to understand, firstly, is that people who have enterprises, have businesses, have a right to be paid for their product. We believe that a normal commercial relationship, a fee for service, a paid product, is critical. Australia's put in place a code that encourages those who are dealing with tech companies to reach agreement themselves, but also puts in place a mechanism that if they're unable to reach agreement, there will be an independent arbiter who comes in and makes that agreement. Extracting tax from fees from tech companies or citizens is never easy, but ultimately it's the right thing to do. It contributes to well-being. It ensures that people employed in the businesses.
In a tweet, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Friday that he had spoken to Prime Minister Narendra Modi on a range of issues, including the progress of Australia's media platform bill. Anuja Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
The BSE Sensex and the NSE Nifty today declined more than 2% amid profit booking. Negative cues from major global stocks also dampened investor sentiments. On the other hand, the rupee appreciated 15 paise against the American currency. A report from the Business World.
The Sensex tumbled 1,145 points or 2.25% to finish at 49,744. Nifty also plunged 306 points or 2.04% to end at 14,676. The broader market at BSE also declined, outperforming the Sensex. The BSE Mid-Cap Index fell 1.34%, while the BSE Small-Cap Index depreciated 1.01%. In the global equity markets, Asian stocks today traded mixed. Japan's Nikkei 225 gained 0.5%, while Singapore's Straits Times ended in green but almost flat. On the other hand, South Korea's Kospi fell 0.9%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng declined 1.1%, and China's Shanghai Composite Index plunged 1.5%. European shares were down in intraday trade. Global crude oil prices rose amid demand recovery. In intraday trade, Brent crude prices were trading around $63.40 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were around $59.70 per barrel. And in the forex market, the rupee appreciated 15 paise to settle at 72 rupees and 50 paise against the US dollar. Lalema Aneja Dang for World News, All India Radio.
Now moving on to sports. In boxing, Arundhati Chaudhary in 69 kg category and Naurem Beberozi Sana Chanu 51 kg category won gold medals as India's women contingent ended the 30th Adriatic Pearl Tournament in Budva, Montenegro with 5 gold, 3 silver and 2 bronze medals in addition to 3 male boxers winning bronze. India's women's contingent thus finished top of the podium at the tournament and took home the trophy.
Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian reports that free speech protests continued against jailing of musician Pablo Hasél. Sputnik writes British FM RAB calls on UN to probe China's alleged rights violations in Xinjiang. A quick look at the headlines once again. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar reaches Port Louis, hands over 1 lakh additional doses of made in India COVID-19 vaccines to Mauritius. India signs $50 million line of credit agreement in defense sector with Maldives. Strike called by protesters paralyzes business in several cities of Myanmar. Global terror financing watchdog FATF plenary meeting to take call on grey-list status of Pakistan. Australia says there will be no change in the media law related to tech giants, and in boxing, India's Arundhati Chaudhary and Narem Baby Roji Sana Chanu win gold in 30th Adriatic World Tournament in Montenegro. And with that, we end this bulletin. See you at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.